Hello watercolorists. We are on our 7th video now, and last time we did a very loose, free style of painting. This time we are going to learn, please don't be intimidated by how much is going on in here, but basically we're going to learn how to do kind of a more tighter, more illustrative style of painting. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint an object on a background, and it's going to be planned. There's going to be a drawing that you're going to do beforehand. You don't have to do a drawing, but if you do a drawing, then you know you're going to get the type of result that you want. We're going to learn how to do the local color. That local color is the color of the object that you're painting. In this case, it's going to be yellow for the lemon. And we're also going to learn how to do a shadow, both on the lemon and on the background underneath, the surface that it is resting on. We're also going to talk a little bit about light and how do you make it look like the object that you're painting is actually sitting on top of a surface instead of floating. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit about different options on how you can paint. By the way, here is an example so you can fit the whole thing into the screen. This is a postcard I made based on that painting. So when I do a picture like this, the first thing I do is I draw everything. And like I said, it could be much simpler. It could be just one object on a background, but I draw whatever that object is in pencil, and I may be very loose in that drawing, and then I go into it a second time with pen. And I usually use a Micron PN pen. That's my favorite. But if you are really nervous about drawing, one thing I recommend is that you do things like fruits and vegetables. So today I'm going to do this onion. And the nice thing about fruits and vegetables is they're all kind of blobby. They're not perfectly symmetrical. And if your line wobbles a bit, it's okay. It will still look like whatever it is that you're trying to do a picture of. Another nice hack for drawing, if you want to do something more complicated, is take a photo of what you want to draw. Then pull up that photo up on your laptop, on your monitor. Then tape your paper directly to your monitor. Turn out the lights, do this at night, and then you will be able to see the outline of the object through your watercolor paper that's taped to your monitor, and you can trace that shape with a pencil. Now, after you've done that, you might find that you need to adjust the drawing a little bit. It may not be perfect, but at least you have the general proportions of whatever is going on. So that's one hack. Another one is to use carbon paper, where you put a sheet of carbon paper in between a photocopy or print of your photo that you want to do a copy picture of. Then you put your carbon in between the two layers, watercolor paper on the bottom, tape them all together, and then just trace each shape onto your watercolor paper, and the carbon will transfer the image. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's basically another way to go about it. And you can also take a drawing class, but we're not going to go too heavy into drawing in here just because we've got our hands pretty full with just watercolor. So my suggestion for now is just do a nice simple blobby shape, and don't worry if it's not perfect. Do the best you can. Don't get caught in the drawing, the pencil eraser trap where you draw something and then, oh no, it's wrong, and you erase it, and you draw it, and you erase it, and you draw it, and erase it. I find that part of why I like to do my drawing in ink is somehow it forces me to just stop and focus and commit. And then after I've done that, I go in with my eraser and I erase whatever I've done. So, then I'm left with the pen ink drawing, which is what I'm doing. So here's what I've done. Here's my picture. And I just pressed really hard with my pencil. I didn't use ink this time. But it more or less looks like that onion. It's good enough. Don't worry if yours doesn't look as good as mine. But we're having this experience. We're learning how to paint an object. And so we're doing a different approach than in the last one. The last one that we did we layered. So here's like another example of a layered picture. I painted a bunch of pink here. I let it dry. Then I drew in the flower shape. And then I painted the blue anywhere that was a background color. And so I've only had to do that with the blue area. And it's kind of a fussy picture. We're going to do a slightly different approach. The approach we're going to do is more like this one. There's no overlap between the background and the object. I painted the object, these flowers, and then I painted the background around that. And this is a much trickier way to work because, you know, you have to make that area twice. Whereas this one, I only had to go and outline that once with that blue. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so when I paint this, I think I'm going to leave the background on this white just because this sort of process requires a lot of drying time. I have to paint it once, let it dry, you know, then I go in with the background a second time, let it dry. And I'm not going to do any editing on these for the sake of simplicity. So we're just going to break this into just shadow and local color. So I'm going to do the local color first, let it dry completely, then I'm going to add the shadow. If I wanted to do a background, I would fill this whole thing in with a background color, and then I would do the shadow last. Hope I'm not jumping around too much. So we mixed a bunch of different interesting colors in video 5. And some of these are actually pretty close. These guys are quite similar to the color of this onion. So it's really helpful, like I said, to do these exercises, to just play around and really get familiar with what can red, yellow, and blue do. So I know I can make this from alizarin crimson, that bright cadmium yellow, and phthalo blue. So I'm going to make a bunch of that brown, and I'm going to paint this onion that color. And when I paint this onion, there's a bit of a highlight. It's kind of hard to get everything on the screen. I'm going to notice what is the light on this onion. I have direct, strong overhead light. I get a highlight right here. The angle I'm at, I can see kind of a white area of the reflection from the light. And then I also have a shadow, and I can see the shadow on the table, and I can see the shadow of the onion. I also have a little bit of reflective light from the light colored table onto the onion. It's actually a little bit lighter right here. So I'm going to save a very light area here for the shiny onion. I could even leave some of it pure. If I left some pure white up here, then that onion would look super shiny and reflective. And then I'm going to have it just be a little bit lighter down here, so it looks like there's some reflection between the table and the onion. And this will make the onion look like it's really sitting on a surface. It won't look like it's floating. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by mixing that color. See if I can match that onion again. And I think I'm just going to fill this whole thing up. This little section I think is big enough to handle. Once again, you don't want to run out of paint before you're ready. But this is a small enough picture. I think this will be fine. So I'm, making about a teaspoon and a half of paint. So I can actually go ahead and dissolve that paint from before. Another exercise. I know there's going to be some blue in there. Not very much. I'm actually going to grab some of the color that I dissolved, and you can save paint from previous projects. You don't have to throw it out, especially if you're painting at home like I am. So I've got some red, I've got some blue. There's going to be a lot of yellow in this. Hopefully I didn't go overboard with the red and the blue. Mixing up my brush, my dirty, rinse it out in my clean, just to really knock out any extra so I don't make my yellow contaminated with my other colors. So I've gone in there with my yellow, splashing my paint around, Let's see what we've got here. So I'm going to fuss around a little bit till I get the color I want. And maybe I'm a little too far one way. I'll just compensate till I get the brown I want. I really like this brown right here. Let's see where I'm at. Not bad, kind of on the pale side. I'd like to go a little deeper. This looks more orange to me. That says there's more red in there. Maybe a little bit more of both the red and the yellow, I'm going to guess. So I'm going to go use up the red on my palette. Stir it around gently. And I'm making sure that all the paint is off my brush and mixed in there. So this is my tester sheet now. I want to make this more concentrated, not enough pigment, although the color is good. It's just not as deep as I want. Contaminate my red a little bit, oh well. So I can just keep going in with more red, more yellow, more blue, gently swirling around, a little more red, a little more blue, a little bit more yellow, because my color is very close, which means I need a little bit more of all three in order to get that color again. Every once in a while I can go, I wonder what that looks like. It's a deeper, more brownish, less yellow. It's pretty good. Maybe I'll stop there. I like that. Okay, so I'm pulling this down gently because this thing is totally full. And got a little excited with all my paint everywhere. But it's okay. So I'm going to paint this onion, and I am going to save a little bit of white right here. If I wanted to, I could even draw a light pencil. The only problem is if you draw a pencil and paint on top of it, then it's going to stay. You won't be able to erase it later. So I'm going to alternate between my brush here that is clean, or excuse me, my brush which has the paint, and then I'm going to go in later with some water to lighten up the bottom part and maybe a little bit around the center part as well. So one thing I do is I don't want to zigzag all over the place. I want to start at one end and make my way to the other. So I'm going to start at this end. Don't want my paint to dry before I'm totally and completely ready. And this is my area that I'm going to keep. I have to go quickly because I dip. Want to go fast. No dilly-dally. Fast, fast, fast. I'm gonna go over the whole thing with one color very quickly. I want to work on this while it's all still quite wet. If it's a hot or dry day, if I'm working outside in the sunshine, my picture can dry faster than I want it to. You have to be careful. Quickly rinsing out my brush. And now I can add water to this area, lightening this up. Both adding water and kind of trying to pick up some of that pigment. Rinse. And you can see how just kind of making little weird shapes because there's a texture to that. And I'm lightening up, I'm picking up that paint. My brush is just slightly wet. It's not super wet. If I added some more water to it, that will also push the pigment out of the way. And I can also go down here. See how I'm adding water and also kind of pushing and lifting up that pigment. So you can do all sorts of control with this. I have to just keep looking and noticing how wet is my picture. I can put more back on there if I want to. It's still quite wet, but the clock is ticking. So I've got a highlight, sort of interesting. I've put water, I've removed some of that paint, I've added some water, I've made this little highlight a little bit more irregular. If I want, I could adjust it a little bit more. Let's make it a little bit closer, more in that center part up there, right in here. If I want, I could add a little bit more water down here, just a teeny bit. Be really careful. It's easy to add too much or take too much away. And there's a certain amount of, like, you look away and then all of a sudden everything's changed. I can see here, this part is a little bit drier. I can see beginning to get a little bit of a background here. I can just kind of touch it around. So it's a little, it's you know, there's some surgery going on. This is the type of thing that you practice over and over and over again. I've just done a lot of technique right there. So just to review, I mixed the color. It's a color that I achieved previously. I knew I could get it from that red, that yellow, and blue, so I mixed it again. And then I painted everything with that color very quickly, starting in one area and spreading out to the other end, carefully saving a big area that I knew I wanted it to save some pure white, the color of the paper. And after I did that, while it was still very wet, I removed some of the paint with the brush, kind of like a sponge, and I also got my brush wet and also put in some water to further push that paint, that brown out of the way. And I did the same thing down here. So there's a highlight down here from the table. So that's step one. And this is something you do over and over again whenever you want to do, you know, here's an apple I did. You know, I used a couple different colors on there and did a couple layers, and of course the lemon that I showed you before. And I've got this big papaya and all those cute little seeds. And I had to save all those seeds. I kept them white and then painted the black after everything else was done, and saved those little tiny white dots in every one of those little seeds. So, you know, it's a little obsessive, but if you enjoy it, it's a lot of fun. Okay, so I'm going to stop now, and in the next video, I'm going to show you how to put in the shadows. So we just have the highlights. Next time, we'll do shadows. Okay, have fun.